Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is Mike Morini, CEO of Workforce Software, to discuss the impact of a return to normal on factories and essential workers, supply chains, purchase behavior, all the things that make the economy tick. Mike, it's great to meet with you. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jill.
And Mike, many companies saw a drop in demand due to the pandemic because of lifestyle changes. A notable example here is in the soft drinks industry due to the closure of movie theaters. How did companies with a dip in demand adapt to consumer behavior?
Yeah, I think they had some challenges, right? If you think of one of our big customers, which is a soft drink manufacturer, and you saw movie theaters closed, you saw sports venues, you saw a lot of fast food chains closed for a while. The demand for syrups went dramatically down, right? So they had to fix that, and they had to adjust very, very quickly. And I don't think they adjusted very well, right? They had to lay off the workforce, they had to slow down, and it really had an impact on their employees. So they had to cut back, and it impacted the bottom line negatively, and they had to redirect people to areas that were still consuming, like their liter bottles or their cases in the big box consumer stores, right? So they had to redirect employees. And I think while many of those companies are very well automated and state-of-the-art in their manufacturing, logistics, and distribution, they realized they were behind on how they engaged with their employees and saw some impact there in terms of employee morale, as you might imagine.
And similarly, some industries saw surges in demand with changes seemingly overnight, especially in home essentials and cleaning products. How were these manufacturing companies adapting?
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, one of our customers is one of the largest consumer products manufacturers in the world. And you know it, we all felt it, right? If you were looking for disinfectant spray and paper towels and toilet papers, that went through the roof. But they, again, their shop floors were very well automated and state of the art, but with their employee engagement, they had some challenges because they didn't know who was going to be impacted for the shifts in terms of COVID impact, et cetera. So believe it or not, many of them just had pools of people waiting. 50, some of the bigger companies had up to 100 people just in the bay waiting to see if the shift was going to be short. They had to plug people in. So it's been crazy whether the company saw a spike or a dip. One of the things that jumped out very clearly from COVID was both those that were in peaks and those that were in valleys. There was clearly an impact on how they were able to schedule, how they were able to contact their employees, how they were able to manage what were they going to do in terms of how they paid their employees. So there was a big focus now on, oh my goodness, not just what we're manufacturing, what we're building, but how do we engage with our employees through these crazy times?
Right. And of course, you have to think about their safety as well. So how were these companies keeping workers safe and preventing burnout while also meeting consumer needs?
Yeah, one of the things that we did, those that were, most state-of-the-art engaged and could communicate through their employees, through their smartphones, et cetera. If you take an example, we had a pre-shift COVID health check. And that's what people needed to see. Hey, were you exposed? Contact tracing, all those things. And if you have a good example, companies that were prepared and best engaged with their employees, you have an example where somebody's given a quick micro survey on their phone. Hey, were you exposed? Do you have a fever, right? And if you're set up the right way, that employee will reply, hey, I was exposed. Well, if your system's been set up in real time and you're acting on data, right? Those that were set up so they could act on their employee data, that manager to that employee is immediately notified that they've got an employee that's going to miss their shift. And oh, by the way, that manager could take action and say, okay, I've got this shift open. It requires this level of certification for this level of employee to meet this regulation so we don't get out of compliance with this collective bargaining agreement. And they could immediately fill that role so they didn't miss the shift. Kept the employee safe, told not to come in, so they're not exposed and they don't expose anybody else anymore. And it also let them keep production moving. So those that were properly engaged with their employees were able to do that very, very quickly.
And what are some of the best practices you've seen companies employ when faced with unpredictable demand?
Yeah, I mean, it all has to do with how they engage with their employees and can they react to data. So the companies, if you think about the world in the manufacturing world, they're all state of the art. There's robots out there, whether it's their manufacturing floor, whether it's their warehousing capability. And one of the things that COVID really and the pandemic really brought to the forefront is the companies have severely underinvested in the systems and where they engage with their employees. Particularly now, the big paradigm out there, Jill, is this deskless worker. The deskless worker used to be considered just a blue collar worker. Well, the deskless worker today with the work from home paradigm is now almost 3 billion workers. That's 80% of the workforce. And if you look at the investments that companies have done in terms of investing in technology for that, it's less than 1% of the corporate spend in investing in technology for the deskless worker. Well, that has to change, and that has to change. And those folks that have invested in it, they've been able to do things like have engagement with their employees. If you think about the manufacturing world today, where you can create a micro survey for your employee to find out how they're doing. Are you coming back to work? Do you feel safe? Do you feel this? The example that we had, a small example, which is really cool from one of our employees, his high school age daughter was looking to take a job and she came down to two. One was a clothing manufacturer, which was really cool for kids that she could work in the mall, and one was a grocery store. And at the end of the day, the local retail grocery chain gave her the ability to pick her hours on her iPhone. And she went with that because she didn't want to have to make the phone call. But if you think of that more of an impact, with a lot more women in the workforce on the manufacturing site, we have a real live customer example where we have a woman who was given 4 overtime shifts in a row, great for the income, but you really don't know how's that impacting her work-life balance. And now the manager can immediately send that person a survey after that last shift to say, hey, you've been getting a lot of overtime. Is that good? Are you happy with the extra income? Do you need it? Or is that actually having a negative impact on your home life? And I think one of the things that's coming out of COVID is that all businesses now have to trust their employees. The employees have to have a bigger voice, and they have to find a better way to engage with employees so they can, whether it's a spike up or spike down, they're finding a way to efficiently manage their employees so they're engaged, they feel like they have a voice, and they're coming to work productive in the right frame of mind.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a silver lining to the pandemic because these things needed to happen, and to see these trends accelerated is a good thing for everyone. So my last question to you, Mike, are companies really adapting their work practices to be ready for the future and be diligent and continue to do these best practices?
Yeah, we're seeing it. Our business, you almost feel guilty, right? But our business has seen a huge spike because we're really focused on the employee side of the business. And all the studies you see from McKinsey just came out one that there's a 3 to 5 year acceleration in the digitization on how employees have to engage, how employers have to engage with their employees. Things like not just physical health, but mental health now, and that work-life balance, and how are we doing? Are you doing okay? Because this fatigue is real for everybody, right? It's really exciting that we're coming out of COVID and we're assuming that with the vaccine, we're going to get there, but there's going to be a ripple effect and down the road on how the employees, particularly with the Gen X and the millennials and Gen Z, on how they want to feel like they have a voice in their role in the business. And we're seeing with our customers in particular, and the pipeline we have in the engagements we're having in some of the world's largest brands, they're looking for a way to better engage, to make sure they know how their employees are doing and what they need to do to keep it a productive and a conducive work environment.
All right, Mike, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.